Good evening, everyone. Please rise for the pledge and remain standing if you like for the invocation. Thank you. Steve Gay here, Fountain Hills resident, Democratic Club, and airline pilot. Hi.
Good evening. As always, I'd like to thank everybody here and at home for taking such an interest in making Fountain Hills an even brighter gem in our beloved corner of the Sonoran Desert. The term invocation comes from a Latin word which means to summon or call upon. Invocations often call upon lawmakers to set a positive tone and put aside differences as they work together using facts, reason, and logic to resolve the issues before them. Seeing past big differences of opinion is a tall order, but if we can stop being this rigid person with fixed ideas about others, it's amazing how much they improve, sometimes almost instantly. Also, keeping a gentle watch for sources of hidden kindness in others lets us move more freely and kindly through life, perhaps even in town council meetings. Humor has rarely been used in invocations, starting way back with the Romans, maybe because they were not particularly known for their sense of humor. However, there is evidence that humor can summon a relaxed, positive tone in a room. I mean, how many times do comedy shows end with people glaring at each other, right? So I'll close with some local humor to end on a light note. Many years ago, a woman from Fountain Hills called into the Saturday NPR show, Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. When asked to say a little bit about our town, she justifiably mentioned our beautiful desert scenery and, of course, the fountain, which she helpfully informed the nationwide audience was the world's tallest fountain, shooting water up to 500 feet into the air. Without missing a beat, the host asked her, "How do you guys drink out of that thing?" Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mayor Dickey.
Here.
Vice Mayor Grzybowski.
Present.
Councilmember Fidel.
Here.
Councilmember McMahon.
Here.
Councilmember Kalavianakis.
Here.
Councilmember Toth.
Here.
Councilmember Skillicorn.
Here.
Thank you. We start, as always, with our, statement of participation.
I was
right.
I was gonna display our new video, but I can't access it. Let's see if I can submit to it. Hello and welcome to the Fountain Hills Town Council meeting. I am Linda Mendenhall, your town clerk, here to give you an important message. Anyone wishing to address the council regarding items listed on the agenda or under call to the public should fill out a request a comment card located in the back of the council chambers and hand it to the town clerk prior to consideration of that agenda item. When your name is called, please approach the podium, speak into the microphone, and state your name for the public record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. It is the policy of the mayor and council to not comment on items brought forth under call to the public. However, staff can be directed to report back to the council at a future date or to schedule items raised for a future council agenda. Thank you. And what the goal of this is really that when you walk in, starting at 5:15, I would have that on a loop. This is just to make it a little easier for those who have never approached council with, requests to comment and so forth. I hope you liked it.
Thank you. So we will now move to our reports by council members, town manager, and mayor. Town manager?
Thank you. I just have two quick updates for our council as well as our public. One is this Saturday, we are going to be welcoming probably more than 3,000 high school students to Fountain Park. It is the annual cross-country race. We have it generally every September. It is the Fountain Hills High School host, and we have schools from all over the state that come, which means the park will be very, very busy this Saturday morning, starting early, probably arrival between 5 and 6 a.m., and then the run takes place. And they're done usually between 9 and 10 a.m. So it is an early morning. It is expected to be hot. Because we have so many runners, it also closes down Saguaro Boulevard along the park there between Paul Norden and Parkview, because we have parking for probably 50 to 60 buses in that area. So it will be busy, but it will be a great event. It's fun to come out and watch if you're around on Saturday morning. Also, I wanted to recognize that Monday is September 11th. It's Patriots Day, and that, you know, we're familiar with Patriots Day as it recognizes the tragic events that occurred on September 11th, 2001. In honor of this, the town will be lighting the fountain red, white, and blue to show our respects for the lives that were lost, as well as our appreciation for our first responders that serve our community every day. So you'll be seeing that Monday evening. With that, that's all my updates.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't really have a report. I just want to say a thank you to Rachel and the town staff for that wonderful way of memorializing those who were lost in 9/11.
First thing I want to do is, I know we're probably all going to mention this, last week was the annual Arizona League of Cities and Towns Conference. The point of it is it gets a bunch of council people and town managers together along with some of our state legislators. It's not necessarily political. It's about problems that we all have. All cities and towns have problems with vacancies. We all have problems with our roads. One of our newest commonalities with all the other cities and towns is the upcoming loss of the residential rental taxes. So we all went in looking for, hopefully, some city or town that has already talked about it and maybe trying to find out how they can backfill these funds that are going to be going away. So it's an annual conference that I have loved going to every year because of things like that. It's a great opportunity to find out what other cities and towns are doing and something that maybe we can try to pick up on. The other thing I wanted to talk about today was tomorrow morning I am attending the first of the Make a Difference Day planning meetings, and that's coming up on October 21st. If you would like to register to be a volunteer, you can do that on the town website. I believe we still have a couple openings for clients, so if you have anybody that's a neighbor or a member of your church that may need to have some work done, have them contact Kim in Community Services. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things. October will be Domestic Violence Month, and the town will recognize that month by turning our fountain lights purple on Wednesday nights, and also they will shroud the town hall in purple as well as recognition to that month. And like the Vice Mayor said, we were with a lot of elected officials down in Tucson where we had different breakout sessions. We learned some things about bonds, how they're issued, why they're issued, different dollar amounts, water conservation and filtration, and other things like that. So it was worthwhile to attend some of those sessions, so we did find out some good information there. And public service announcement, so Saturday night, the Four Peaks Rotary is having a community fundraising event for the Lahaina, Maui, Hawaii residents that were displaced by the fire and that sort of thing. So you can sign up online for that, and it's a dinner actually Saturday night from 5 to 7. And in lieu of that, if you want to make a donation, I'm sure they're taking donations as well. Did I miss anything on that, Rachel, do you think?
Did you want to show our
Also,
support?
the town that night will also, since pink is the color for Hawaii, we will be having the fountain turn pink that night in honor of those people in Hawaii. So, That's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I, too, attended the conference in Tucson, and it was really great. I thought it was really wonderful to be able to reconnect with our colleagues in other cities and towns, listen to their concerns about their towns and what's going on, and realize that we're, basically most cities and towns are facing the same things. So it was a good conference. We had a good time. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. Thanks, everyone, for coming tonight out of your busy schedules to attend your town council meeting at home on YouTube and live streaming. Again, it's very important that the constituents keep an eye on their government. And I would like to first talk about the Cities and Towns Conference, which I think is expected. It was a tremendous conference. It gave us a chance to talk to, again, the mayors, the council, the managers, state reps about all the problems that are concerning all of our towns. And it's surprising how similar all the towns are. I also just got a chance to discuss, is there any perfect town councils out there? And all the people I talked to said, no, we're very flawed. And I said, well, that's good to know, because all of us here in the town council are doing the best that we can, and we're doing the best job that we can, and that's kind of what the people in the consensus was. We're doing the best for our constituents. Do we see things differently? Do we have different policy disagreements? Certainly we do. But sometimes perfect is the enemy of the good. And if you did have a perfect town council, then once you elected a human being, it would not be perfect anymore, because we're all flawed individuals. And so let's just try to work together for the betterment of our town. I had the pleasure to play the saxophone with the Desert Valley Winds band at the community center. Thank you, Ms. Mayor, for attending. It was a spectacular success. We had many standing ovations, and we were asked to play there again, either during the Christmas holidays or possibly this spring. So I'll keep you posted on that. They expected around 50 people. We had 250 people showed up. So thank you, Fountain Hills, for turning out. Last thing is I did attend the lawyers' luncheon this month, and the county attorney, Rachel Mitchell, was there. Just a fascinating woman. She gave us a brief on what's going on at the county level attorney. A few of the things that she covered, and I'll just cover very briefly, but they are providing immunity for the prosecution of drug use. When somebody calls 911 and says, my friend is dying, they're exempt from prosecution. I think that's really good, instead of them walking away because they don't want to get busted for drugs. Also, there is a lifetime injunction against perpetrators, which would keep perpetrators from visiting their victims. I think that's a really good law. There were police sentencing enhancements for ambushing police. I think that's a wonderful law, too. And then lastly, the expansion of the statute of limitations for DUI offenses involving a collision for death or serious harm. And so the statute of limitations was doubled on that, thankfully. So that's all I have today. Thank you very much. And again, thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, we all attended the conference in Tucson, and I won't go into that in any detail, but I also had an opportunity 2 weeks ago to do a sit-down seminar with members from the CAP, the Central Arizona Project, and also the ACC, Arizona Corporation Commission, talking about water. So it's fascinating, and there's quite a bit of interplay between the states that surround us, but also Washington, D.C. So it's not like Arizona can make its own plans. We have to come up with a compact agreement with the other states around us, and then also it has to be approved by by the people in Washington. So it is a complex process, but it's coming next couple of years that this has to be finished up. So this is something that we're going to be hearing much more about. So thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. At the League, I'm on the nominating committee for the nominating subcommittee for the executive committee. And so there was a slate of members. They all wanted to remain in their spots, and they were all voted in. As a member of the resolutions committee, I had the council had the opportunity to see what will be the next legislative agenda for the League. Three of them they all passed except one. 3 of them that passed were about short-term rentals, which Scottsdale brought those forward, and those are going to be real good for us too. One did not pass. It had gotten forwarded to us by the policy committees, and that was to support equal rights for women. So that was an interesting conversation. So maybe next year we'll get equal rights for women. So I hope to prepare a summary. I have some information about some of the classes I got to go to and such. And September is September is Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month. Please wear teal and stand in solidarity with the brave women fighting this disease and honor their mothers, sisters, daughters, wives, and friends who've been tragically lost. So keep that in mind, please. Our next item, we don't have any presentations, so our next item is call to the public. Do we have any speaker cards?
Yes, Mayor, we do. We're going to start out with a written comment. I know this item was last agenda, but it just came in today, so I'm not sure if they just want to continue to let us know their thoughts. But it's from Jennifer Brown regarding the donated stored construction materials and that she's against it. And now for our comment, request to comment. The first up, and Jeff Webb, you do want to speak in person. Okay, perfect. And then on deck is Chris Enos.
Hello, my name is Jeff Webb. I'm a resident and a business owner on the Avenue of the Fountains. I met with most of you guys, except for one, and when we gave you a presentation on improving the Avenue of the Fountains. We need to start looking at that. It's time. We're generating lots of income for the town, and the Avenue is basically a stopover point for people to walk their dogs and then they leave. No one stays down there. You know, it's except for festivals, and it's trying to be everything for everybody, and it's not doing anything. This is the nicest, most important boulevard in our town, and we're just letting it sit there. We're not taking full advantage of it, and I think it's time that that the city council starts to focus on this. And if it doesn't, then, you know, I'm representing TAMA. I don't know if you know what TAMA is. But you haven't heard much from us because we're a new organization. We're the Avenue Merchants Association. But you're going to start hearing a lot from us if stuff doesn't start happening down on the Avenue. And have some vision. It's time. Okay? Thank you.
Hey guys, all right, so Tuesday's on a Wednesday this month, just so you didn't know. I thought I'd give the Madam Clerk an opportunity to pronounce my name again, so thank you very much. You did a great job. It's only 4 letters, but you know, it can be hard. Last month I came and spoke with regard to public safety, and more particularly the contract with regard to the sheriff's services. And you have very able counsel. I've talked with him. He's great counsel, has a great reputation. But he is the town attorney, and he's not specific to any one particular job outside of his town attorney functions. And respectfully, I suggest that you hire an individual with regard to this contract that will be specific to this particular negotiation. It's over $6 million a year, as I understand it, unless I'm wrong. And you don't know exactly what's in it until somebody presents it to you. I don't know if it's been presented to the council yet. I think you have to identify needs as the policymakers in this town. You have to identify what didn't go well the last time. You have to be able to say, what could we do better this time? You have to be able to account for your enforcement of your local ordinances, and you have to create alternatives so that you can have some leverage in these negotiations. Make no mistake about it, you're in $6 million worth of negotiations. That's not an insubstantial sum. And it would behoove you, I believe, in my humble opinion, to hire an attorney who does this for a living and is separate and apart from your able counsel, who has his own duties and is on salary, or another negotiator. And I would respectfully suggest that this be put on the agenda and that the town authorize the procurement of such an individual to assist in the negotiation of this before it's too late. You're already in September. You got an expiration date on this thing. And the worst thing to do would be put in a bind at the last minute, say, well, here it is, take it or leave it. So I would respectfully suggest that you put that on an agenda and have it authorized to hire separate and independent counsel who can assist in the negotiation for your town.
Next, we have Crystal Kavanaugh, and on deck, Lori Troller.
Good evening, Crystal Kavanaugh, Fountain Hills resident. Since a pro-bond statement was made by the mayor from the dais at the last meeting, essentially publicly supporting a tax hike on the citizens, I want to go on record as being against the $25 million school bond plus interest over a 15-year period as being fiscally irresponsible, considering the current enrollment of 1,174 students. It's not clear how this dollar amount was determined or whether there was an in-depth assessment specific to our district, but there was no actual bond committee that was formed to be held accountable for this. Who will provide the oversight? So this brings me to a related point, our sign ordinance. As a PAC, Reclaim Our Town tries very hard to operate within this convoluted, difficult to understand sign ordinance when placing our opposition signs. In January, the whole sign ordinance was repealed, but not replaced. In February, an emergency council was called to reinstate the ordinance, but the enforcement of temporary signs was rightfully put on hold. But then in June, in the last vote before summer break, some of you surprisingly voted 4-3 to start up code enforcement for temporary signs, just in time to affect this special election period. This directly impacted our messaging regarding the bond measure in relation to size of signs and placement. Suddenly, there seems to be new rules. Even though there is an important ballot measure, we're told there isn't really an election cycle, although there is still a $40,000 special election taking place. Nothing has officially changed with the original ordinance as of yet, but locations that were acceptable for signs last fall are now somehow no longer acceptable this fall. Who decided that? And then last week on the website, a new bold print line suddenly appeared in the ordinance saying that since there was no primary or general election, the state statutes for political signs did not apply. With no changes to the ordinance, why was this message suddenly put on and just as quickly removed from the website? Is the intention to discourage free speech for this ballot measure? Once again, this sign ordinance continues to bring inconsistent answers to our questions, which is why it was such a hot topic when the candidates ran last year. So this has me asking, why has this issue not yet been put back on the agenda after there was a reconsideration request? Why not revert back to the hold on temporary sign code enforcement until a better written ordinance can be implemented? Thank you.
Everybody. I was going to, Linda, Rachel, Aaron, Mayor, Council, for the record, I would love to do that. If I can give my presentations that way, I'll give you guys these videos. That'd be great. Lori Troller, resident. My topic tonight is 5G, specifically the broadband ordinance. It's now a few days shy of 2 months since the town received a draft ordinance from Attorney Campanelli. I would expect by now most of the remaining council work on the ordinance would be complete. In personal conversations with some of the council members, that's not the case. Apparently, the council members aren't even aware that the draft ordinance was provided to the town. My concern is this qualifies as a breach of the Pierce-Coleman service contract with respect to responsiveness, and in turn is a violation of the Constitution in the form of maladministration. At this point, with concern for lack of progress, I'm putting the town on notice that tomorrow I'm placing a FOIA request for the town to provide me, and I'll provide it for the residents, billable hours that Aaron Aronson has charged the town related to this specific item. Thank you.
Jerry Sheridan.
Hello, my name's Jerry Sheridan, and I live in Fort McDowell. But before that, I moved to Fountain Hills in 1976, and at one time I had over 50 family members that lived here. My daughters went to school here, and my grandkids went to school here. Besides that, in 1977, I began to police here and as a deputy sheriff with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. And I spent the next 40 years overseeing the Sheriff's Office, administration of law enforcement in this community. To say I have deep roots and a concern for the public safety of this town is an understatement. So now I'm running for sheriff. And I saw on the video of the last council meeting with a discussion about the contract. Well, when I became the chief over the Patrol Bureau in 1995, I had the Board of Supervisors sign a contract, an agreement with the Sheriff's Office to support contract towns because I saw the need for the communities, for good law enforcement at a good price, and the value it added to the Sheriff's Office and the outlying communities in a regional concept. That was very important to me, and I continued through that until I retired in 2016. I'm standing here because your current sheriff doesn't understand that. He doesn't understand the need. And I can tell you, if Jerry Sheridan was your sheriff today, you would not be having this problem, this negotiation, because the sheriff's contract would have been filled from the onset. There would never have been a problem. And if there was an issue, you wouldn't have to fight to get back that $3 million. Withholding that money back from you should not be an issue. This is a no-brainer. This is money that the Sheriff's Office didn't meet their contract, and it certainly isn't the captain's problem because he didn't cause this. This is from downtown, and I know because I was a chief, I was a deputy chief, and I was the chief deputy, and I know how this works. And I was involved in the contract, and I'd almost be happy to negotiate the contract for the town for free because I know all about it because I negotiated the contract from the other side of the table for many years. So with that, I thank you, and I know you can't answer, but I'll be here after to be available to answer any questions you might have. Thank you.
Mayor, that's it for public comment.
Thank you. Council, would you like to respond?
I will respond, Mayor, and I appreciate the opportunity. You know, the comments that have come as of late have been of the nature that they accuse town staff and accuse the town attorney's office of dereliction of duty, of maladministration in office, of violating codes of conduct and contract. And that's enough tonight. So we're going to walk through, if you don't mind, Mayor, some of the misstatements and uninformed statements that have come out tonight. With respect to the 5G ordinance, I sent an email to the council already, so you're presumably aware of this. We received that on July 11th. How Ms. Troller knows that is a mystery to me, but she was aware that we received that on July 11th. Mr. Campanelli advised this staff to take a look at his suggested changes and to offer any comments, questions, red lines in response. This is what we would do with any proposed work product that's provided to us. We did so. Director Wesley looked at it. My office looked at it. For your information, it is an extremely dense document. It's 50 pages long, and it's all telecommunication regulation information. We have questions. We pose those questions to Mr. Campanelli on or about August 28th or 29th. I'll have to go back to my email. We haven't heard back yet. So it's in process. Nothing was withheld from anybody or from the council. I understand that Ms. Troller may be upset about the fact that she hasn't received the draft. That's really neither here nor there. We don't provide working privileged drafts in response to public records requests. Nor are my bills matters of public record. They can see ours, but we're not disclosing privileged information about what we have worked on. That will not happen. So that's with respect to that first issue. Are there any questions from the council with respect to that issue? Thank you. The next issue, maybe Rachel can speak to it if she wishes to. We certainly, with respect to the MCSO contract, understand that the public has strong feelings. We also understand that there's a desire to see more that's being given in negotiations than what apparently everyone believes we have received. I will happily advise the council on the possibility of retaining separate counsel. I will say at this point, I'm not positive how much more traction we're going to get in the process, but I'm happy to advise the council of that. Rachel, did you have anything you wanted to follow up on with respect to that? Okay. Third, the staff has advised repeatedly regarding the sign ordinance. We have analyzed this issue upside down, inside and out. We have gotten back to the individuals that are involved with the question about the signs. The statute that they're referring to simply misreads how it applies. It doesn't apply when there's not a primary election. It says in 161019 subsection H. You didn't hear about that. So I want to make sure the council's aware and clear that when you hear this information and when this information comes to your attention, it's not something that staff has been derelict in duties. It's not something where staff has failed to respond. It's not something that we haven't looked into. Staff's not stupid. We're not idiots. And we have the opportunity now to be able to articulate for you, and we will from here on out, articulate exactly what the basis is for staff's decision. And it's ultimately up to the council whether to take that into consideration or not. Do what you will with it, but we will not have our professional dignity impugned any longer with respect to these comments. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Does anybody have any questions or anything? Councilwoman?
May I speak? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Aaron, I guess my question is when it comes to Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, I've got two questions. As far as retaining outside counsel, yes. One would we be retaining outside counsel to address the overcharging that some people perceive has been done by Maricopa County to Fountain Hills? And then two, would we be requesting to get outside counsel to negotiate the current contract that we're trying to nail down for future services?
Mayor and council member, I don't know. We have not discussed the possibility of retaining outside counsel before. If that's something that the council wishes to consider doing, the council is certainly able to provide direction to staff to do that. Do you have any follow-up on that, Rachel?
No, I echo what he said. At this point, there's not been any direction to do so, to look into that potential, the cost involved, the timelines involved. As of the beginning of the calendar year, the direction was for the town manager and the finance director to begin those negotiations, and that's what was done, and that's what's continued. And again, as we discussed last week or 2 weeks ago, a number of council have been part of that discussion, and that's as far as it's gone. If there's interest in doing that, we can take that direction and look into that, but as of yet, that has not come up.
And Aaron, I don't know how far we can go with some of this, but the MCSO contract has been, we've had many talks with MCSO. There's been deep involvement, professional involvement, involvement with law enforcement, helping us come up with what we want to bring forward. But this reaction to something that doesn't exist yet, we don't have the contract. So we are reacting or hearing that there's something wrong with the contract that we don't have yet. We have been negotiating it, and it should be on an agenda in likely October. And as far as the other item, it's being stated that in a factual way, something that hasn't been determined to be factual. So we will move on from that. If people want to look at that later, we can do that. The MCSO is a governmental entity, as we are, and we'll just stop right there with that. The sign ordinance was not asked to be reconsidered, and the sign ordinance is exactly like any temporary sign, just like we've said a million times, we cannot regulate signs on content. So that's where we kind of are still with that. And that's that. Do you want to say something to me? Do you need to say something?
No, the only thing I wanted to add, Mayor, in response to what you said was two things. The first issue was with respect to the contract. I fully expect that the council will have an opportunity to discuss that contract in executive session before it's presented for acceptance. So that would be a really good opportunity to have that conversation. The second thing that I would raise is, to correct the record somewhat, I believe there was a request for reconsideration of the sign ordinance, but it was withdrawn.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
So
all
there was
I wanted to
nothing
make
that we're not compelled to bring that back.
No.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, may I address that too? Thank you. The motion to reconsider the sign ordinance had nothing to do with temporary signs. It had to do with banners for our friends at the Bachelor Pad, and it had to do with A-frame signs and multiple entrances. Even if the motion to reconsider was heard, it would not have covered temporary signs. So I want to straighten out the record on that right now.
Thank you.
Can I ask Aaron a question?
Yeah, sure.
Aaron, would that discussion on that contract include, and if this isn't the right place to bring it up, possible arbitration and other remedies for the town?
So you can have it be as many agenda items as the council sees fit and as we have time for. Certainly the negotiation itself is its own deal. Prospectively, right? We're looking forward. If it's retroactive, then that's a whole different discussion we need to have. You can have it at the same time, but they are two factually distinct issues. So yes, we could agendize it both ways.
And then the other question I would have, it's possible that Matrix Consulting, who did the analysis of that contract on behalf of the town, that we hired them to do that, maybe they could represent us in negotiations as well.
That's something we can certainly discuss.
Thank you all. Our next item are consent agenda items. Unless you'd like to take something off, could I get a motion, please?
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Toth.
Aye.
Councilmember Fidel.
Aye.
Councilmember Skillicorn.
Aye.
Councilmember Calavianakis.
Aye.
Councilmember McMahon. Vice Mayor Grzybowski.
Aye.
Mayor Dickey.
Aye. Thank you all. Our first regular agenda item is about a cut and fill waiver request. Rachel? Oh,
That's okay. I'm going to hand it off to Farhad. He's going to give us an update and a little background on the item.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're good? Oh, okay. All right, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Rachel, members of the council. What you have before you is a cut-fill waiver request for a single-family residential lot in Eagle Mountain, the exact address here on the screen. Now, the reason this is before you is not because of a zoning ordinance provision, but because of a provision in the subdivision ordinance that states whenever you propose cut or fill on any one lot of more than 10 feet, it requires town council approval. In this case, and I'll make this a point of clarification to the staff report, the applicant is proposing 14 feet of fill in a small area of the lot. I beg your pardon. Here, I'm here to clarify it, and I misstated it again. About 14 and a half feet of fill, and so I had rounded it up to 15 in the staff report for simplicity's sake. So the subject property is in Eagle Mountain, just south of Shea Boulevard there. It's and just east of the border with City of Scottsdale, about 3 lots over. Again, it's a single-family residential lot with a considerable grade. It's about 22% sloping down towards the west. The property is about a little over 27,000 square feet, and is zoned, just as for purposes of background information, is zoned R110A. And incidentally, just as a side note, because of the zoning at R110A, it's not subject to the hillside ordinance. So it's allowed 100% disturbance. I've provided a bird's eye view of the lot just so the council can appreciate the, at least to some extent, the grade. Again, I mentioned it's about, this is looking north, incidentally, as indicated by the arrow here on the left. It's looking north, as you can see. Well, actually, this pin, I should mention, is roughly the geographic center of the lot. Immediately to the north is, as you can see, is an existing single-family residential lot, and downhill to the site is another existing single-family residential lot. The lot immediately to the south is currently vacant. However, there's another existing home south of that. Another bird's eye view, this one looking south. You can see the residential, or the existing single-family residential home in the distance, and the three downslope towards the west. Okay, so what the applicant is proposing is a home, a one-story home of a little over 3,800 square feet, livable and total under roof, including the two-car and single-car garage, a little over almost 5,400 square feet. Now, this area here, just to the west of the home, is the subject for this cut-fill waiver request. This is roughly a 954 square foot area that indicates the area that will consist of fill of over 10 feet. And as I mentioned, rounding up, 15 feet maximum. The fill is shallower towards the east, and because the contours go down, the amount of fill will increase to about 15 feet. Staff is recommending approval of this cut-fill waiver request, as we believe the fill is occurring in a relatively small area, again, of about 954 square feet. And it is staff's belief that no view sheds will be blocked from any of the neighboring residents, particularly to the west, as they will be looking up towards the home, and the area that will be filled is roughly consistent with the finished floor elevation of the home that's being proposed. In case the council would like to see some elevation drawings, I have provided a few, actually just a couple elevation drawings, but with that I can end my presentation and open it up to questions.
Thank you. Did we have any speaker cards on this?
No, Mayor, we did not.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions about this project? Yes, Councilman?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Director, is this an HOA?
Mayor, Councilmember, yes, Eagle Mountain does have an HOA.
Okay, and they have approved this, or does it still go through their process?
Mayor, Councilmember, I don't know for certain the answer to that question, but typically we do advise developers to go through the HOA first before submitting any building permit filings with the town.
Okay.
But the architect, I should mention, is here as well, and he can help.
Okay, do we have a nod or not that if the HOA has approved it? Yes. Okay. And then Solitude Canyon, is that Fountain Hills or Scottsdale? The street to the west.
Solitude Canyon, since I'm familiar, council member, with that street name, as I've reviewed a few permits.
Yeah, if we go one street to the west, that's the name of it. I think
yes.
so.
Yeah,
it has to be
within the town's jurisdiction.
Okay. And then, so typically I like to go by what the zoning says on waivers. I typically don't like waivers, but I have a test. And one is, there something special about the project, or is there something special about the property? In this case, it sounds like, you know, the project is just the home, but it's the angle of the property. And it does seem to be because of the zoning, it was, you know, when it was originally zoned, it was known that there would be, dirt would have to be disturbed. So it probably passes my test unless someone has like a water runoff issue or something like that that I want to hear about. If anyone has anything like that, you know, feel free to voice your concerns.
Oh, and Mayor, council member, if I could just mention real quick, the area that is being filled at a 15-foot max level is a uncovered patio primarily. Just a tiny portion of the home is within that fill area.
Any further comments or questions? Can I get a motion, please?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Fidel.
Aye.
Councilmember Skillicorn.
Aye.
Councilmember Calavianakis.
Aye.
Councilmember McMahon. Councilmember Toth.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Guzbowski.
Aye.
Mayor Dickey.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item is going to be, we're going to hear about our community economic development strategy. So what we're going to do is we're going to hear from Amanda. We're going to get the presentation. So we'll go through that whole presentation. Then we'll see if we have any speaker cards, and then we'll discuss. Is that okay with everybody? Then that way we hear the whole thing? Okay, we're ready.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. I want to let you guys know that I've been battling the last few days with laryngitis, so bear with me. And then a request, I have 21 slides. There's about 19 of content. A couple weeks ago, I provided you an update on the data. So if you guys are okay, I won't go into lots of detail. We'll pass through some of those, and I won't read everything. We'll try to summarize it. So is everyone okay with that? All right. Well, again, Madam Mayor, members of council, members of the audience, extremely excited to be presenting the proposed economic development strategy. It has actually been 10 years since we've updated the plan. There was an attempt back in 2019, and it wasn't approved. So when I started with the town, it's something that our town manager said we need to start working on, and really felt that a few years ago it didn't pass because it was missing a very important ingredient, and that was community engagement. And so this strategy we're proposing as 3 years. Some folks, as I met with you guys one-on-one and then presenting this with SPAC, said, wow, there's a lot in here. But know that economic development is a team sport, and so want to thank Bo Larson, John Wesley, John Perez, Kevin Snipes for their help, and know that your mighty big economic development team of 2 is not handling all of this, and the work is not going to get done in 1 year. So community engagement, we attempted to have a leadership workshop back in October, but because of schedules, we were also right in the middle of an election. We decided to wait and have that in January, and we had about 50 of our leaders, so residents, business owners at the table. We had a public workshop April 12th. Again, we had our one-on-one meetings in May and June with council. It was presented to the Strategic Planning Advisory Commission. I want to make a note. It was in the paper about them perhaps making a recommendation. In talking with the chair, Patrick Garman, because their scope really is the town overall strategic plan, he chose for the group not to make a recommendation, just be a sounding board. And so again, that's again good to hear from our residents. They brought good feedback and some retired business owners, et cetera. And then was able to present to the Scottsdale Fountain Hills Area Association of Realtors. So data and trends, again, I'm not going to read all of this, but want to point to the median household income of $87,000, the median sale price of $660,000, and our median rent price of almost $2,400. Now, if we go to our current major employers, again, I will not read this to you, but if you look at this, this is service-based industry employers. If you look at those workers, they make less than $40,000. So if we go back to those median prices, we don't have to be a mathematician, which I'm not. It's not adding up. These workers are not living in Fountain Hills, most likely, and we're hearing that through some of our business retention site visits. Our targeted industries currently, so again, when I started day one, what we were promoting was financial services, healthcare, professional services, through just my profession, and then listening to the community. I will say I've modified this a little bit, but also want hopefully council's blessing. But adding assembly, small scale, we actually have this today. We have businesses behind the Target shopping center. We have our watch company doing assembly. So on a small scale, we should be advertising that. And with that too, it sends a message to the Arizona Commerce Authority, who's the state economic development agency, and then the Greater Phoenix Economic Council, our regional economic development organization, that we're open, that if they have a lead, to come knock on Fountain Hills' door. Bioscience is new. That came up multiple times in our public works workshops. Financial services will keep healthcare, hospitality, retail, and startups. Apartment occupancy, I think I've been beating a dead horse. Supply-demand issue, we'll skip that one. Vacancy, we just talked about. Again, though it's nice, office a few months ago was at 50%. There's a significant drop. And I will tell you, with John Wesley, myself, the phone's been ringing this summer, which is exciting. Our tourism, again, I'll just make a note here. When I came in, I was like, is Fountain Hills traditional tourism? And if we take our events impact study and combine our visitors, local, regional, when it comes to events, we're missing out on the traditional tourism. And so what I mean by that is heads in beds. So when they're staying here for a period of time in our hotels, that is bed tax and sales tax, so a significant opportunity there. Our focus areas are business attraction, retention expansion, marketing, strategic partnerships, and tourism. So first, under attraction, there's going to be about 3 slides on this, but staff is proposing to do a new downtown strategy. I don't always like to assume, that's not a good thing, but the last time we approved a plan was back in 2009. And so if you think back in 2008 and prior, if that was some of the work product of hearing things from the public, we then were hit by the Great Recession. Things happened with the economy. Things now with COVID. There's right now 9 districts within the strategy, and perhaps we need to scale that back. Because buckle your seats, if we're wanting to do stuff with downtown, this is going to be a multi-million-dollar project. 2, collaborating with the property owner of Four Peaks Plaza. If we're not familiar with plaza names, that is Target or Target. Looking at redevelopment opportunities, again, aftermath of the Great Recession, as well as COVID, half of the plaza is empty. We don't want that. It benefits nobody. Exploring opportunities in 4 different areas. Again, if you guys can read that, for redevelopment and revitalization, and wanting to create zoning districts and flexible uses. So Palisades, for example, is within our downtown area. I have shared with you one-on-one and publicly that there have been opportunities to place some people in some of those vacancies in that area, but it does not meet the zoning requirement. And so we're not even gonna try. And so we're wanting to work on that, bring to council opportunities to have some flexible zoning, and also look at height and various things to entice people, that where they could do an administrative track. So again, there's that administrative approval. If we get through those flexible zonings, that's an incentive. Or it's saying, okay, if you want to do something above and beyond that, here's your path. Going to planning and zoning, town council. And so that adds 4 to 6 months. Time is money for our businesses. Again, business attraction, developing and publicizing a streamlined development review process that has come up numerous times. And I'll have to say to you, coming in as a new girl, I would ask John Wesley and team, you don't do a permit for this, or we don't do this. So it's telling our story, because there are things where traditionally with other municipalities, there is a review process, there's a permitting process. And so being able to articulate that, but also meet with some of our property owners to understand what are areas for improvement, and that we're open to hearing that. Again, just earlier painting that picture of who our major employers are, those median prices. We need to start diversifying our housing opportunities even more. And then looking at developing architectural design standards for our businesses. So again, the downtown, a lot of people don't know that they're in a downtown. So is there an opportunity to modify when we're looking at revitalization or looking at new businesses to have design standards? This is the last slide, I believe, on business attraction. Wanting to partner with the Arizona State Land Department. A couple of you have been interested in this. Our residents want to know that we're being forward-thinking, but this is very long-term. Again, Mr. Wesley and I have a lot of experience dealing with the State Land Department, and it's a long process, but just to again, reinitiate those conversations. Also looking at modifying the public art policy to allow for performing and temporary art. So again, an example, we've got commercial businesses, we have a requirement for public art. Instead of continuing to do sculptures, is there a way that they give the money back, we entice them to give it to the town, and we look at, expanding our concert series. Again, later on we'll talk about a Second Thursday concept. And then creating a placemaking strategy to enhance the vibrancy of the downtown. Business retention and expansion, continuing that wonderful program. Again, thanks to all of you for participating, monitoring those trends, and when applicable, bringing it to council to take action. Continuing our 8-week Shop Local summer campaign. Again, when I started, our businesses wanted support. And so asking, well, what does support look like? So in the summer, just reminding our residents to please shop local, and just reminding folks who are new and are used to paying a primary property tax that you don't do that in Fountain Hills, so we really rely heavily on that sales tax. Partnering with the Fountain Hills Chamber of Commerce on a welcome package to our new businesses. So again, welcoming them, having that red carpet sort of moment, but also letting them know opportunities of different events that are happening, knowing what to do, not to do, we've heard, related to the sign code, et cetera. And then creating a Second Thursday concept on the avenue. It may not be Second Thursday, but just to give an idea. And then conducting a market analysis of our existing businesses who are looking to expand. So I can say this publicly, everybody knows, but Adero has plans to expand. The Fountain Hills Medical Center has plans to expand. Restaurants have talked to us about expanding. And so keeping track of that and then making sure, one, when they're ready to pull the trigger, that we're ready to take action, and then making sure we're not a barrier for them expanding in the town. Marketing, wanting to create a comprehensive economic development marketing plan, different infographics related to those targeted industries, a specific economic development marketing brochure that really paints the demographics, the quality of life, and then collaborating with key stakeholders on consistent brand messaging. So I'd shared with some of you several months ago, Bo and I were looking at a YouTube video, got really excited, and there was a real estate agent promoting the town. Well then, as we're watching, it became cringeworthy because the person's saying that, we're a sleepy town, we're boring, we have no nightlife. Yes, the mayor's mouth is open, so was ours. And so, no, so again, making sure all of us are ambassadors. It's not just economic development, that we have consistent messaging. Because again, when things happen like that, it takes us months to prove that that is a false narrative. And sometimes too, with our real estate agents, they're the first to meet our potential residents. And so making sure that we're on track with messaging. strategic partnerships. So looking at the possibility of creating a co-working space within the town with our home-based businesses, our startups. This past year, we worked with the Arizona Business Alliance, and we have a market here in Fountain Hills. And so looking to see how we could tackle that with a public-private partnership. Identifying opportunities to attract a university or satellite campus. So working with the Fountain Hills School District to understand, what are our potential students and leaders looking at for the future. I have met, again, some of our employees working in our businesses, and they shared with me the town used to have a design school. And so finding out, okay, well, what happened with that? And then, of course, too, at the International Dark Sky, there's obviously an opportunity there, and they've been working very closely with ASU. Again, collaborating with those universities for pipeline programming, collaborating with Fort McDowell to improve the aesthetics as we're coming in. So you guys have heard me too. When I was applying for the job, came in off the B line, went on Shea, and I was like, oh, when I saw the burnt down building and some of our faded wayfinding signs. So again, that's a brand image and messaging. Partnering with Fort McDowell and Salt River Pima on ways to explore our growth opportunities on the Beeline. With the town being the immediate community, we, of course, as residents, unfortunately, have sales tax leakage to Scottsdale, but how do we work with them to grow that corridor to where then, too, the people visiting are coming to Fountain Hills, and then we can seek those sales tax. For tourism, creating a comprehensive tourism marketing plan for targeted audiences. So this past year, we've been looking at the top 10 businesses who are coming to experience Fountain Hills. So how do we start targeting to some of those states? You've been seeing the top 5, but we are seeing Chicago, New York, Los Angeles looking, and so what can we do to boost that visitation and get people traveling here? An opportunity to attract a new resort with some of our hotels. Unfortunately, an aftermath of COVID is they're scaling back on their meeting rooms, thinking like we're never going to be in a room together again. I was at a conference in July with 500 people, and so there's an opportunity here to work with the resort to see how we can add meetings and conventions. Looking at new signature events and tournaments, and then collaborating with existing hotels on the events that we're having, giving folks a reason to stay, collaborating with our hotels. Some people don't know, but to be able to attract with an event or with a business group, you need an actual code. So again, there's an area of opportunity there. We, of course, want to support the progress of the International Dark Sky Discovery Center. I think one more slide. And then partnering with the Dark Sky Association on a permanent location within Fountain Hills. So again, we have this wonderful designation. Our phone is ringing, the Dark Sky's phone is ringing, but we're having to do planned events to go to certain areas for stargazing. So this is an opportunity that, again, at night, if it's at midnight or 2 in the morning, we're not a sleepy town, dang it, that there is a place for people to stargaze. Cross-promoting events can be very effective. So we've got spring training, waste management. If people are coming here for a couple of weeks, we have fabulous events, so why not come to Fountain Hills? And then looking at potential opportunities within Fountain Park itself. Again, because I can pick on myself. Again, when I was a visitor, again, applying for the job, I went to the fountain. It was beautiful. It was gorgeous. Spent my 10, maybe I didn't last 15 minutes, but then I didn't know what to do after. So are there things that we can activate within the park? Next step, so staff is recommending approval. Again, we think it's time. I'll tell you, I've been getting good reviews. People are excited. And then I'll share with you fast. 1:25, so a couple of hours before the Strategic Planning Advisory Commission, there were some folks that got a hold of the proposed plan, been a little gun shy, and they said, hey, I saw this in the plan. I get it. It's proposed. It hasn't gone to council. But in a couple weeks, we want to meet with you and John Wesley looking at a development project. So again, people are excited. Let's keep the momentum going. If you guys do approve the plan, staff will then come to the November council retreat, November 2nd, and have a high-level implementation plan, what's ongoing, short-term, midterm, long-term, give you a sneak peek into the short-term objectives where there may be some dollars we're wanting attached, and just kind of check the pulse of council. And then looking at a phased budget approach back to, again, our downtown. Some things have happened with the downtown. A lot of things when we're looking at 9 districts have not. So we need to take a phased budget approach if we're wanting a vibrant downtown. With that, Mayor, it sounds like you're going to open it up for public comment, and then I'll come back for questions.
Thank you. Do we have any comment cards?
Yes, Mayor, we do. First, in your packet, we'll go through those. We have Jeff Uzetta, he's for it. Christian Bergman is for it. Andrew Gonzalez is for it. Mike Hoops is for it. Suzanne Nan is for it. And then we also have, maybe they're still here in attendance, but Jim Bordemus, he wishes to comment in writing that he's for it. And Susan Dempster also wishes to comment in writing that she's for it, she supports it. And then we do have 2 cards, speaker cards. And so first up is Clayton Corey, and then on deck is Karen Webb.
Hello, Mayor Council. Clayton Corey, 8-year resident. Can't believe it's been that long. Wow, what an amazing presentation. I just wanted to come up here and let you know that I think Amanda and John did a wonderful job with the economic development presentation, and I hope that you approve that. I think they bring a lot of good ideas and a lot of energy to something that should have been updated a while ago. It's been about 10 years, so it's really something that we've needed. And I think that they have a lot of good ideas with revitalizing downtown, mixed use in particularly. So I'm really looking forward to this. And I just wanted to say, you know, and wow, what a great presentation. So thank you.
Hello. Hi, Mayor and council members. I am Karen Webb, and I am a resident and a business owner. I'm fully in support of the economic development strategy. I think that, you know, we have been here about 4.5, almost 5 years, and I haven't seen anything really happen on the avenue. I see it every single day, and I hear from so many businesses the stress about just surviving. And what needs to really happen is we need to infuse that vitality that Amanda talks about, not only into the avenues, but honestly into the council, because this is the time to really revive it. A lot of people were lost, and during COVID, you can see the vacancies. And I've heard council members say that the key is just to bring more businesses. I can tell you right now, without the vitality there, the businesses will not come. So I'm excited to see Amanda's plan. I think she has done a phenomenal job. I really, in the entire time I've been here, she's been the only one to really seek out the business owners and inspire us and get us excited about staying and thriving in this city, so in this town. So I think it's time. And before we lose more people, it's time to create that vitality and turn the tables and so have people start coming to this town. Thank you.
Mayor, I lied. Betsy Lavoie had her comment card, and then we had Larry Myers submit one. So Larry, you're on deck. After Betsy.
Hi, good evening. Betsy Lavoie, you all know
me. I've been a resident since 1979, represent the Fountain Hills Chamber of Commerce, and as you all know, I've worked closely with Amanda Jacobs since she started here at the town of Fountain Hills with the Chamber of Commerce. So I'm here to enthusiastically support the Economic Development Strategic Plan proposed for our town by Amanda and her team. I think it's a comprehensive, a well-structured plan. It demonstrates clear commitment to fostering economic growth, to fostering and enhancing the quality of life for our residents, and positioning Fountain Hills as a thriving and sustainable community. I'm confident that the economic development plan will serve as a catalyst for positive change in our community. I'm hopeful it will not only boost our economic vitality, but also enhance our town's appeal and overall appeal, making it more desirable place to not only work, but live and visit. Thank you.
Mayor, Council, Larry Myers, resident 42 years. I support this plan. It's admirable. It's been talked about for 30 years probably, with one exception. And I'm going to take you to the Wayback Machine. I am not in favor of any administrative control over rezoning and business building and development in any section of town, and I'll tell you why. So a group of residents way back 5 years, 6 years, opposed the nursing home at the entrance to town at the corner of Trevino and Saguaro. Would have been a bad look for the town. I don't care what you say. Come here to die, we're all old. And it was a struggle and we stopped it. And I personally negotiated the deal with Dan Kaufman to bring the medical center here. And we got it here. And it got built. It just didn't get built correctly because the town service director overlooked about 5 or 6 town ordinances, exposed mechanical, a vegetation plan that was never enforced, Trevino getting widened to accommodate the traffic jam at the bottom of the hill. There's a few others, and I'm not going to bore you with them. And that's why I don't want administrative control. I think the planning and zoning people did a heck of a job. They worked through all the things. The residents weren't happy about some of the stuff. Ambulances weren't supposed to back up, and they still do because of the beeping alarm. Nobody enforces that. And that's all due to the fact that everybody let it be administrative control. And Mayor, I remember when this came up, and Phase 2 and Phase 3 were under consideration, and this SUP was given administrative control, you personally said we might have to revisit this for Phase 2 and Phase 3. So if they're going to expand, you're going to revisit it. But as for the rest of the stuff, if it's a great idea, I think the Planning and Zoning Commission, which are all people volunteering that you've appointed, should have a say in this, not just some bureaucrat sitting up in town hall making decisions where the citizens don't get a chance to speak. And that's the only point of Amanda's presentation that I absolutely will fight to the death on. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, to Aaron's comments earlier, I'd like to ask John if he'd like to clarify anything. I realize that that's out of context of what we're talking about tonight. John, I realize that's also putting you on the spot. If you'd like to share some follow-up after this meeting to Mayor and Council, you certainly can.
I'll just add that during that whole process, actually both of them, both of the projects, I was very involved and Council was very involved. So, and one thing I want to mention before we take comments from everybody is that I did notice you saying you worked with John or John was at a meeting with you and such, and I just wanted to point out that several years ago, one of the things that a former economic development person said was there was never any interaction, and how could development not have to do with economic development? So I really appreciate that and heard that. And I think between the two of you and the other John and everybody else that was involved with this, that you went through a very thorough process. You had obviously had the two meetings, the public meetings. You gave everybody up here the opportunity to meet with you one-on-one. Evelyn Kasuga with the Center for Arizona, Future of Arizona, I want to make sure I mentioned her. She was at the League, and how well she did to get us to kind of all come up with some of these ideas. So with that, unless you had something right now, should we start with the questions? Questions and comments from council? Yes, sir.
Two things. Thanks for the presentation. And to Mr. Myers, your question, I think most of the projects will come back through the council anyway. So we will have some say. So they probably will end up as agenda items. But my one question for you, Amanda, is you highlighted a marketing plan, tourism plan, and a business retention plan, and different plans in your presentation. Those will all come back to the council as well, right?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Friedel, traditionally, no. Some of those plans don't go back through council because it's operational in nature and may not be a policy-related decision. Anything policy-related, so again, to Mr. Myers' point, doing an overlay district, that will have to go through planning and zoning, as well as the council, as you articulated. And so if there was something that residents took exception to, or council, it would be at that point. But those other plans, we would not, because it's operational in nature and wouldn't be policy related. Unless some of those are tied to a budget. That, of course, too, we would bring back. You're welcome.
Thank you, Amanda. I read through your presentation before, and I thought it was very well done, very focused. It's obvious you're driven. It's obvious you want to represent the town in a great capacity to have it be better and have more business, sustainable, et cetera. It's a lot of work, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to echo some of that praise. Amanda, I want to very much highlight that you put together this plan, this strategy, put all this work into it, and then said exactly when we're going to start talking about implementation. And I love that, and that is my only comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Two things. First of all, thank you. That was fabulous. I want to, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I do want to mention that I always feel like Parkview gets left out. So I would like to make sure that while we're talking downtown, that we remember to include Parkview. Parkview is considered downtown. No matter what people say, we call it downtown on our plot. So we need to treat it as such. Also, I really like your concepts on the public art. I think it's a fantastic idea that it doesn't necessarily have to be what we traditionally consider art. There's so many different forms of art out there, so I love that you included that in your presentation. Thank you for thinking about it.
Thank you.
Well, I mostly just have things to say that I liked. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your little thing here.
Yeah, if I may, Ms. Mayor. Thank you. A very good presentation, well put together. I'd like to see maybe just a little more meat on the bone. And I say that with all due respect. You mentioned how we would like to streamline our business development procedures. We had talked about possibly increasing fees for streamlined procedure. You know, we've been talking about that since I've been on council, and tonight I was kind of hoping that you would say this is how we're implementing that strategy instead of just talking about that strategy. I think a lot of the things are really great. Public art, partnerships, brochures, aesthetics. That's kind of all the window setting. But like when somebody runs for office or when you are selling computers, you get your signs, you get your brochures, you get your strategy, you get your talking points. But it's not until you start knocking on doors that you get votes. Or if you're selling computers, you can have everything lined up, but you got to start knocking on doors and talking to people. I'd kind of like to see, if we're trying to attract biosciences, that we start going to biosciences conventions and putting up a Fountain Hills booth. I'd like to see, if we're trying to attract financial services, maybe we do a mailer to all the Valley financial services. Fountain Hills is open for business. The way I did it in Chicago was I looked at how many people are here, and then you look at the type of business that you're trying to court, and it's math, as they say. It's all the numbers. If you've got 25,000 people, and if you open this kind of a boutique, this will be a profitable business. And so I would just like to see just a little more of that, knocking on doors, talking to people, going out into the Valley or beyond, and just letting people know, because if we just work on aesthetics and art, and we're just kind of shuffling the chairs in our town, and we have to reach beyond our town to attract more people to fill all these vacant storefronts that my constituents keep telling me there are too many, and we need to get those filled. And so, again, with all due respect, I think your steps are there. There's a lot of good here, but I would just like to see the implementation a little more, and just have reports on how we're implementing getting more business owners and more people to populate our empty storefronts. But thank you for all the work.
Councilwoman Tull.
Thank you, Mayor. And I don't mean to set aside your comments as well, but I just wanted to cut in. Councilwoman Kalvianakis, I appreciate your comments. The economic development strategy is that strategy. So how you mentioned, like when we were running for office, right? We needed a strategy, we needed our handouts, and then we started knocking doors. This is us approving the strategy. Amanda's talked about our handouts and knocking doors starting November at the council retreat. So that implementation that I just complimented her on, that's what kind of you're talking about, that meat on the bones. So this strategy, I think it's a good overall plan. I think it's something that we should be passing, and I will make a motion once the mayor's had a chance to say what she wanted to say.
You can make it if you want.
I would like to move to approve the economic development strategy as presented by Amanda Jacobs. Thank you.
And I just wanted to expand on Councilman Toth's statement that a strategy is a high-level, big umbrella picture of what's going on. It's not the intricacies involved. You will come back, we'll talk about that in November, and you'll continue your quarterly updates to us, and we'll still have an opportunity to keep communication open. So I don't feel like anything was missing. Just wanted to reiterate Councilwoman Toth there.
Thanks. So when we talk about housing and possibly having more, I want to make sure that we have some parks involved with that. One of the things that when we talk about having younger people live here, and you look at some of the other communities, there are neighborhood parks and that are walkable, so that might be part of that conversation. I love the performing art thing. Placemaking strategy to enhance the vibrancy of downtown. We had a speaker come up earlier, Tama. I think we've been hoping that group would be a big partner with this, and so I can see that will happen. Second Thursdays. What happened to third Thursdays? Isn't that what we talked about? It kind of rolls off the tongue.
So Madam Mayor, again, high level, it's just a concept. We're not picking, right? We're not implementing that. It's second or
it's just
or third.
I thought of third
Thank
Thursday,
you.
so
Okay.
I want to make sure that goes on the record.
We'll consider that.
Attracting the university and satellite, so I love that. You kind of tie that in with the fact that that some of our focus is on medical and nursing schools. There's nursing shortages, medical schools, so sort of that niche thing. Even PAs and EMTs. I know some firefighters and such, they train in other cities than where they're working, so there could be opportunities there. You mentioned ASU, NAU. As far as a talent pipeline, I hope that we would make sure that EVIT is included with that in the Fountain Hills School District, and because that's kind of along those same lines. And years ago, we looked at what they called, I think it was in Minnesota, but it was called a college preparedness school, which was a really unique, and we're finding that kids were getting out of high school and maybe not doing as well as they could in college, and this was something, it wasn't adding extra time, but it was something that kids could go to. And again, the kind of thing that you can attract people to come here, even though we're not right on the 101 and the 202 or such. You know, it's got to be that something that really fits well, and the astrotourism obviously does. And again, you had that crossing over with other events. So when we have a Super Bowl here, and I know we used to go to NASCAR races, and you could go to the one in New Hampshire and you'd stay as far away as Boston. So even though the NASCAR race is over in Avondale, you could put packages together here and get you there and such. So I think that's really awesome that you thought of that. And the last thing is recognizing our weather. Recognizing that, you know, you don't go to Cape Cod in December and get a lot of action. So what do we do to always make sure that we're aware of that and not try to do something that isn't going to happen because it's 110 degrees or something. So I appreciate that you're recognizing that. And I think that the whole thing is a great step. We will bring forward the implementation, which has a lot more of, where we'll actually go, what the next steps are, and that it will take some years, and we're ready for that. So we have a motion and a second on the table. Are there any further comments? Can we get a roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Skillicorn.
Yes.
Councilmember Calavianakis.
Aye.
Councilmember McMahon. Aye. Councilmember Toth.
Aye.
Councilmember Friedel.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Grisbowski.
Aye.
Mayor Dickey.
Aye. Thank you, Amanda. Rest your voice.
For your support. Thank you.
And you made it through the whole thing, yeah. Our next item is adoption of resolution approving our new adding an ethics complaint procedure in our council rules of procedure. I think we'll start with Linda. Thank you.
Okay. So are we doing comments, or are we going to talk about it real quick?
So we hear from staff, so we'll hear whatever the presentation is.
all right.
Then we'll take comments, and then we will go through. And I was speaking a little bit to Councilwoman about this, and I think what we can do, if it's okay with all of you, after we have the comments, let's have someone make a motion on the main motion. That way, when we go through section by section, if there are amendments, we can vote on them at the spot, because we will have had the main motion. So does that work? So we're not like discussing and wondering what we thought later. We'll actually vote on them. Okay? Okay. Thank you. Linda.
Okay, so before you today is an update to the council rules of procedure and adding the ethics complaint procedure policy to the rules of procedure. This came about as, it started with the ethics complaint procedure. We started receiving more ethics complaints, and so we wanted to have a way to deal with those, to make sure that everything was logged in, that there was a checks and balances, that I would receive it and then I would forward it along, and who's responding. So we wanted to get a process in place, and so we started doing some research of what other municipalities did, and then it evolved into updating the rules of procedure with respect to our elected officials. I would say it's more, we're representing our town, and so we needed to find a line of how we were to do that, covering free speech and also their ability to represent the town based on comments from the public and so forth. It's a balancing act. And so what we did is we reviewed different municipalities with respect to their ethics procedures, their code of conduct, and added some of that information in there. And what I'd like to do is go over it after public comment. Is there any questions? Anyone want to add anything? Rachel, Aaron?
I just want to, yeah, Rachel and Aaron, do you have anything to add?
No, Linda, I think you covered a lot of the high points. I think what the understanding is that this is a draft. It's intended to be a draft. It's intended for discussion and feedback and direction. It sort of evolved as it was going through. Again, there was a lot of feedback and a lot of different things happening internally. And I wanted to really echo what Linda mentioned, that there is an accord between professional decorum and constitutional rights. And this is a first draft that is trying to navigate a balance between the two. So Linda's comments of a balancing act are exactly right. But we are anxious and very receptive to comments, feedbacks, and direction on this draft.
Do we have any speaker cards?
We have quite a few. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go through the packet real quick for the people who submitted written comments. And you have it's in your packet. The first one is Debbie Elder, and she's against it, and she also made a comment, so you'll want to read that. Patrick Flynn also is against it, and he made a comment as well. Darla and Tom Jacobs are against it, and they also made a comment. Rory Wilson is for it. She did not make a comment, though. Stephen Schmidt is against it, and he made a comment as well. Gina M. Waldo made a comment that she's against it, and also a comment. Nancy Thorns is against it, and she made a comment that you'll want to read. Sandy Meehan is against it, and she has a comment as well. Alan Meehan is also against it and has a comment. Dina Galasini is against it and has a comment as well. Sharon Fried made a comment and she's against it. Lori Scherer, RN, hopefully I said your name right, Lori. She's against it and made a comment as well. Victor Scherer, he's against it and made a comment as well. Jerry Hinsel is against it and made a comment as well. Richard Rutkowski, Dr. Richard Rutkowski, he is against it. Oh, he wants to speak. So we'll send it, pictures to the side. And then Wendy Locke is against it, and she made a comment. Trinette Cannon is against it and made a comment. Kathleen Sylvie is against it and also made a comment. And Art Sylvie is against it and made a comment. Pharrell Palaces is against, no, she is for it and made a comment as well. Robert Peterson is against it and made a comment. I think he submitted twice, but I printed it because he may just want you to know he's against it. He's really against it. Okay, so now we will go to the people who want to comment in person.
Linda, excuse me, I just want to make a comment that a lot of when you said the people were against it and they made comments, I'm looking through them, it appears that people think this is applying to them. So just as we move forward, I just want to know, I want people to know it does not apply to them, it only applies to us. Thank you.
Yeah, also, I second that because it looks as though they think they're going to lose some right to free speech, and it has nothing to do with that. So most of the ones, as you read through them, that is what I understand they're against. They don't understand the concept of what we're doing here.
Right, and that is for the rules of procedure that pertain to the council and to the board and commission members as well.
I'd like to make a point of order and a comment. My point of order is addressing Rachel when she said this was just a draft for discussion. If you look at the regular agenda items, all three items, A, B, and C tonight, were consideration and possible action. And so this isn't just a draft set for discussion, this is set for action. And then the second thing is, with all due respect, Ms. Mayor, I don't think that we can get into the minds of the people that wrote these comment cards and assume that they didn't understand what we were voting on tonight. I think that's a little bit of an insult to the people that took time to fill out the comment cards, that they didn't understand what they were commenting on. And so I'd just like to put that on the record.
Well, I'm not meaning to insult anybody, but when they say you're taking away my free speech, I want people to understand it doesn't pertain to the public. It just pertains to us.
Okay. First will be Dr. Rich Rutkowski, and then on deck will be Crystal Kavanaugh.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Rich Rutkowski, 22-year resident of Fountain Hills. I oppose the adoption of Resolution 2023-30, specifically the proposed new language in Section 8.4A of the Rules of Procedure, and I do understand to whom it applies. While it is important to maintain public confidence in town government, that's a quote from the proposal, as stated at the beginning of that section, the additional proposed language presents several serious concerns. While claiming to, quote, recognize the exercise of free speech, end quote, much of the language does the opposite. For example, quote, refrain from spreading hate speech misinformation. These terms are subjective and not clearly defined, and as we have witnessed in recent years, what is considered misinformation by some is considered factual and accurate by others. As we have also witnessed, what is at first characterized as misinformation is often later determined and proven to be the truth. Second quote, avoiding personal attacks or derogatory language. Is it derogatory to question the actions or votes of a public official? If someone characterizes the vote of an individual as being harmful or contrary to the public good, is that derogatory? It's certainly not a compliment to say that they criticize that vote. Again, it's subjective and essentially undefined. Next quote, refrain from making verbal attacks upon the character or motives of other members of the council, boards, commissions, the staff, or the public. Now that's a very broad and vague restriction, which in practical terms limits any negative comment or opinion, and that is not free speech. Next quote, refrain from making disparaging remarks about other members of the council, boards, commissions, the staff, or the public. This basically says the same thing in another way, and yet again places limits on true free speech. Respect for others is an admirable and desirable trait for all of us and should definitely be expected in our public officials. One can be respectful, disagree, and express that disagreement. However, if respect is to be legislated, as is somewhat proposed here, that legislation or the rules should be and must be objective and clearly defined and must not in any way limit free speech. Those rules should not in any way be able to impose anyone's personal biases or concept of what constitutes misinformation, what is disparaging, what is derogatory upon others. The proposed language in Section 8.4A does not meet these criteria, and I urge you to vote no on this resolution. Thank you.
I'm sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Should I wait? Oh, that's okay. I strongly oppose implementing a fee to file ethics complaints, and I would like to go on record to say I never have actually filed one myself. I am also aware that some have filed multiple unfounded nuisance complaints over this past year. That is indeed unfortunate. However, it is a matter of free speech. This is the designated recourse that citizens have to hold elected officials in check if need be. Will some abuse the process? Of course, but to punish all others is not reasonable. On the other hand, if false malicious accusations are made against council members that rise to a level of prosecution, for example, that's another matter entirely, and the wrong party could certainly pursue legal recourse against that person. There seems to be other first steps that should be taken before restricting free speech through fees. Have you considered announcing at council meetings who has filed ethics complaints that month and the end results? I think over time, people who file multiple frivolous complaints will hopefully be discouraged from wasting town resources. And there seems to be a lot of subjective speech in some of the red line changes. Hate speech, how our words affect others, misinformation, infringing, marginalized or vulnerable communities, insensitive language, and verbal attacks on motives, to name several. What hasn't been working as it is currently written? There is a certain level of decorum that should be expected by both the council and the public, and usually that occurs, but sometimes and usually that occurs, but sometimes on both ends it does not. But micromanaging speech or requiring personal finances to play a role in decisions to file does not seem to be the answer. Be careful what you wish for. Depending who's in the majority can impact the decisions or the implementation of consequences based on subjective measures. Thanks.
Next, we have Liz Gildersleeve, and on deck, Matthew Corrigan.
Good evening. Liz Gildersleeve, Fountain Hills resident. The only resolution to Resolution 2023-30 is not resolving it at all. It must be, in my opinion, completely rejected. Implementing roadblocks to make it harder for residents to voice their concerns about elected officials is simply unconscionable and maybe even unconstitutional. Yes, even those that aggravate you by filing ethics complaints frequently have an absolute right to do so. Ethics complaints are a form of checks and balances and the price we all pay for living in a free society. The cost to the town of $11,000 in fiscal year 2023, as stated in the agenda, to investigate ethics complaints against council members is a drop in the bucket for what taxpayers pay for things like studies that you approve regularly. At the last council meeting, for example, the majority of you approved a parking analysis and a traffic light study totaling $82,000. But now $11,000 gives you angst? Even more troubling than the $200 proposed ethics complaint filing fee to residents is the redlining that was done to the Code of Ethics itself. After reading the suggested changes yesterday, I felt like I'd been dropped in a George Orwell novel. Now you get to regulate and decide hate speech, censure your peers, and decide which of our laws are equitable. There is so much ambiguity in the proposed changes that I can't cover it all in 3 minutes tonight, but bottom line, this redlined Code of Ethics and rules of procedure takes a supposed problem and makes it far worse. So who's gonna stand up tonight against this garbage? I would encourage each of you to throw out every word of this redlined resolution and vote no on the ethics complaint filing fee and move on to more important business for the town, like the MCSO contract, code enforcement of signs, the solicitation ordinance, and 5G, just to name a few things. This agenda item and resolution is complete nonsense, and I can't believe we're wasting time on it tonight. Thank you for listening.
Next, we have, oh, sorry, Matthew.
Madam Mayor, council members, good evening. Matthew Corrigan, homeowner in Fountain Hills. And I'd like to a certain extent, reiterate what's already been said. However, I think the ethics resolution could be a good one. But let me tell you why I think it should change. Page 22, section 8.1, the word equitable in line 4 can have multiple meanings. Equal, on the other hand, is objective and means having the same privilege, status, and rights. The phrase equal justice under law, for example, a good example. Equitable is subjective and can apply to a balanced or biased analysis. Fairness is assumed to be a popular opinion rather than a rational analysis. Equity and inclusion, for example, can imply social justice as equity instead of equality. Eliminate the word equitable and add equal. Page 23, section 8.4a, line 8, refrain from spreading hate speech. Wow. The term hate speech is subjective and should be eliminated. The term misinformation is subjective and should be eliminated. Line 10, 11, 12, our words might affect marginalized or vulnerable communities. Both phases are subjective and should be eliminated. Also, potential harm that insensitive language might cause is subjected and should be eliminated. Page 23, Section 8.4C, line 4. Stakeholders, a new term. It's subjective, not defined, and is clear and not specific, and it is defined, and that should be eliminated. Page 24, Section 8.7. Seek no favor, believe that personal benefit or profit secured by confidential or privileged information or by misuse of public time is dishonest. Yes, it is. This section seems to be ill-defined and vague at best. I suggest you eliminate that statement in favor of a clear definition, one that can be defined. Page 32, Section 2, page 3210.2, Code of Ethics. The $200 can be waived if the complainant receives sponsorship from a member of the town council. That might give cause for pause. We have had very skeptical ethic complaints from some community members, but again, that doesn't justify a council member speaking up and allowing that to disappear. Page 33, Section 10.6, line 3, members of the public body, filing fee is waived. Members of the public body may use any one of the following methods to follow a complaint. Eliminate Section 10.6. By eliminating these by eliminating these 6 parts, you might have a better proposal at hand. Thank you.
Next, we have Lori Troller, and on deck, Larry Myers.
Hi, Mayor, Council, Linda, I never get her, Rachel, Aaron, Lori Troller, residents. And thanks to the mayor for bringing up the topic of hate speech in effect. It's a perfect opportunity to discuss the exactly what can and cannot be done with the First Amendment. You can't put a fine on someone for speaking. You can't gavel someone if you don't like what they said. You can't punish someone for speech. You can't force one to speak an apology, and you can't overturn voters by a simple majority vote. Ethics violations are more than a sour mark on the council's record or on a councilman's record. It's the process by which we, the people, have checks and balances to curb rogue council behavior. Not only are the proposed changes to the Code of Ethics violating the process of checks and balances, they are violations against the First Amendment. Whatever legal counsel is advising for these changes is seriously in legal jeopardy and incorrectly advising the council. If there's an issue motivating these changes, I ask that you go back to the drawing board for a legal solution. All public servants have sworn to uphold the Arizona and United States constitutions. Your signed oath is a contract with we the people to accept frequent recurrence and fundamental principles and to maintain individual rights. See the right of petition, assembly, speech, and press. Nowhere does the Constitution specify word, time limit, or allow a servant to remove a right by rule or code. For rights that are secured by the Constitution, there can be no rulemaking or legislation which would abrogate them, which means to do away with or annul. Your lesson tonight is that to vote against the Constitution by any rule or code is to breach the contract you swore as a public servant and a trustee to my rights and everyone's rights. In a trust, when a trustee breaches a contract, that contract is dissolved. Therefore, you have dissolved your position, office, and granted authority. Worse, by acting outside your sworn lawful position to uphold the Constitution, you're now personally liable for trespass, maladministration, and malfeasance. Consider this a verbal explanation of a forthcoming notice I will serve if necessary. Thank you.
Mayor, Council, Larry Myers, 42-year resident. I am too against charging for filing of ethics complaints, and I think you're probably coming to that conclusion. I think possibly those frivolous and frequent filers, maybe public acknowledgement here from the dais, and that would discourage them from being frequent and frivolous. Maybe they'd be more detailed and to the point. I personally don't know why we have to change the one we had. I liked it. I think it covered just about everything. Section 8.1 says, obey the Constitution and laws of the United States of America, the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona, and the laws of the town of Fountain Hills. Pretty much says what your job is. If you did the first part, you don't need the part that says work to enact and enforce just and equitable laws that promote the well-being of our community. If you do the first part, you've already covered the second part, and we won't have any arbiter. Then we get to section 8.4a, and while it sounds nice, it's just a violation of 8.1, as it is regulating speech. I ask again, amongst you on the dais, who is the arbiter of this speech, marginalizing, etc.? And any rewrite to rein in anyone's public or private speech violates 8.1. Further, as to the public, the only demeaning speech that I've heard at council meetings comes from townsfolk, specifically mostly railing against Councilman Skillercorn and Councilwoman Toth, and mostly personal attacks, never gavelled, and I have yet to witness either of them even make a comment. They've sat there and taken it, which is to the point. It's the person's right to say what they say, and it's your right to sit there and take it. So I would ask, why are we even doing this? We've got the MCO issue. We've got 5G, beg your pardon, since April of 2022 on the being discussed. We've had provisions stripped out of the detox ordinance that all the other towns and communities are putting in, insurance and inspection provisions. We haven't talked about that. The sign ordinance is certainly a mess. You can't figure out where to put it, where the daylight is. So don't charge them for the ethics violations. Keep the old one. We don't need any red in this thing, and let it be, and move on. Thank you.
We have one last comment. It's Robert Peterson.
Mayor, council members, I'm an almost 9-year resident of Fountain Hills. I will die here. This is a wonderful town, but I am an absolutist on free speech. I don't know how many of you, you're all youngish, and you may or may not have ever heard of Mario Savio. He led the free speech movement at University of California in the very early 1960s. He was a moron. Virtually everything he said was stupid, but he is one of my heroes, posthumously. He said things. He defended everyone else's right to say things. The last few years in national politics, we've been talking about hate speech and so on. Unless someone is saying that this person or this group should be exterminated, I don't think it's hate speech. It may be stupid. It probably is stupid, but you got to stand up for stupid speech, because repressing speech
does nothing but harm. And First Amendment forever. That's all.
Thank you, Wall. Does anything change what we want to do to proceed, or Brenda? Because my thought was that we would make a motion, a main motion, which would allow us to amend it. And we can still do that. If somebody moves the main motion and someone seconds it, then we can discuss it and amend it as we go along. I'll defer to you.
Just a few thoughts. Yeah, we do have the main motion, just so everybody at home and here knows. I did draft and submit that to everybody up here, an amendment to 9C that denudes or guts all of the red line language for the most part, leaving in the harmless stuff. Based on the comments that I've heard today, were exactly what I was going to say up here. And so I think, and unless Mayor, if you or anybody else here would like to, I guess, state the opposition to what we've heard tonight, you know, I'm ready to vote on either the main motion or on the amendment, because I think we've reached a point, the arguments have been made. Unless there's a counter argument to be made, I'd love to hear it. I'd just like to vote.
I didn't see the document that you sent because I haven't had time, so I can't consider it. It was sent to all of us. I wasn't noticed, so my concern was with open meeting law. I did go through the document that we have, so that's all I have to reference.
While I do have a lot of things I would like to discuss, if we to go item by item, my first comment is, why are we even doing this? Why are we governing ourselves? I do not believe that as an elected official, we should be making our own code of ethics. This should be done for us. If my mom had to ask me when I was a sophomore in high school, what do you want your curfew to be? Guess what it would have been. And I feel like we're letting the fox into the hen house. So I want to go on record that I think it's completely asinine that we're even having this conversation. That being said, I do have things to discuss along each number. If we feel that we have to continue this, I will support it as a council, but I think it's asinine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to address the previous statement regarding the open meeting laws. We pretty specifically voted on this being we voted on it, right? This being the process for when we're wanting to have a handout at the meeting. That's turned into Linda, and then Linda sends to everybody. I remember us having a conversation about that, and that was sent to all of us by Linda.
And Mayor and Councilmember Toth, you're correct. We did institute something where we said we would share in advance. We may need to refine what we did to make sure that the process we're getting it out is in order and that it's soon enough, ensure that it's getting out in the appropriate way. But yes, it was sent out in advance, to your point.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, my main concern was just the comment regarding open meeting law. We're not doing anything against open meeting law. Otherwise, we wouldn't have passed that procedure. So thank you.
Aaron, can I ask you a question? So in lieu of the fee, it was suggested here that the town manager or somebody list the filers of the ethics complaints. Can we do that in lieu of the fee? Would that be something we could do without any issue? I'm worried about the fee turning people off from, and I was a proponent of the fee.
That was the idea, right?
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
if you have serial complainants, that it serves as some sort of a deterrent.
Right.
Right.
So now I'm wondering if it might be better to, in lieu of charging the fee, take that suggestion and have the town manager recite what violations or what complaints have been filed in lieu of the fee and see how that works.
Mhm.
It's always something we could always amend at a future date if that doesn't seem to remedy the situation. I don't know. That's just something I'll throw out for everybody to think about.
Sir, I could respond to that, Councilmember. So Mayor and Councilmember Friedel, the suggestion for any sort of a deterrent to mitigate those serial complaints is a good one. Fees one option. The manager putting in the packet somewhere. We've done something similar in another jurisdiction where we reported who are the complaints from, and actually I think it was with respect to public records requests, frankly, but who it came from and how much was spent in resolving it, right? So that's an option. I don't know how operationally, Rachel, that works, but legally it's an option.
Because I have heard from at least a half a dozen residents today about the fee. Several of them saying, hey, why should we give up our right? We're on a fixed income and the fee is tough for them. So I want to recognize that.
I got that. I think I understand that. I did want to, Mayor, if I may, I see that Councilwoman McMahon has her light on. I do want to make clear that some of the comments that came from the public tonight were about, this is the constitutional method or the way by which we hold council members accountable. It's what we've adopted in our code as a process for filing ethics complaints. There's nothing in the Constitution that says you have to have an ethics complaint process. You could remove the thing entirely if you wanted to. You're not going to choose to do that tonight, I presume, but you could. There's no constitutional right to make an ethics complaint. So likewise, there's no constitutional right that would prohibit us from imposing some sort of cost mitigation on that. It's not like we're imposing the right to make speech that's constitutionally guaranteed. So I did want to make sure that we understand that. Some jurisdictions don't have them at all. Other jurisdictions do have them, and they're a lot more fleshed out than this. So I want to make that clear. Whatever we do, to Councilmember Friedel's point, there does need to be some, whether tonight or at a future adoption date, I do recommend that there be some sort of deterrent for the frequent complaints. That's how this whole thing got started. And frankly, as the town clerk referenced earlier, this conversation started as a procedural discussion about how are we going to intake complaints, how are we going to keep track of them to make sure they don't get lost in the shuffle, how are we going to make sure they're processed in a timely manner, and most importantly, how do we stop the influx that's in some respects wasting town money and resources. We don't want those, and we don't want to deter good complaints or complaints that may have merit. So that might be a good option. Anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to put out for the council's consideration.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm curious, I'm not totally serious, of how many actual comments we had on this. I think this is the record breaker. And I kind of wonder if we charge $200 per comment, if we could, we could pave our roads with that. But yeah, actually, I'm kind of just prepared to, we had a comment about me just doing a vote. I'm prepared to just make a motion. I read through the amended draft by Councilor Kalvinakis, and I'd like to make a motion to approve that with one small amendment, and that is just to include the names of the filers with the with that. So if there's a second.
Second.
Can I ask for a point of clarification? We just had a big discussion about not charging a fee.
Right.
The amendment contemplates charging a fee. So is that what you're moving for? Okay.
I have a comment, please, if you don't mind, not to mix things up very much. But based upon what you said, the objective of this was to look at charging fees. There's a lot more in this than charging fees. I think that there's a lot of language, et cetera, that's been added that I would like some legal advice on before moving forward. And I would like to know if this is possible, is if we can remove this from tonight's discussion, have an executive session to go over it, and ferret out the exact meaning of why we're doing this and narrow it down to that before entertaining any motions or votes.
Council Attorney, I agree that some of the items that were brought up did have legal ramifications. I don't believe that we're stopping free speech. And I agree with Sharon that it's unfortunate that we're a golden rule community, and yet we have to explicitly define do unto others here. And we've always had this, though. You know, it hasn't been as specific. But I think that it's not only the money that we're spending and the time that is being used by, but that could be used for other resources as we go through a lot of these complaints, but it's also, we have been getting emails from constituents upset by some of the things that they've heard and been said, some of the things that have been said about our staff. So it wasn't just an organic, I mean, it was an organic broadening of this item after we realized that people were upset about some of the comments that they've heard, some of the way that our staff has been referred to a lesser extent each other. But there are disparaging remarks being made, some threatening, some targeting remarks. We have vague targeting, we have vague threats, we have overt threats, we have public statements that are made that I don't think are for the good of the community. And yeah, some of it is subjective, but we've got people, when we get elected, we are not to be alienating members of our constituency. We have a code of ethics. Just to jump to the last part of the amendments, the part about whether we can, you know, turn it around and say that we're getting accused of something. Well, we all know up here that we have a higher threshold, and there's not a lot for us to do if somebody disparages us. We can't really, we don't have the same rights that other people do to defend ourselves. There's a higher threshold there, but we don't have, but then we say things that maybe we shouldn't be saying. We write letters to the editor that say things that didn't actually happen at meetings, and then they're taken. I think back to something that happened a couple of years ago where a council member did something and was specifically said, if you weren't a council member, it would have just been fine. But your words had more something to them. So we have to take that seriously. That said, I think we are definitely not in agreement on the charging. I don't think, it doesn't sound like we are. The last part of your amendments there with the kind of way that we can make people pay, like, so if they bring something forward and it's found without merit and it costs $1,200, what we just motioned and seconded on would make the person making the complaint pay that whole amount. And do you really want to do that? So before we vote, or,
if I could just clarify that. And to clarify that, but to just back up a little bit, I mean, two weeks ago, we discussed the U.S. Constitution and freedom of speech. We discussed a stranger going up to somebody on the street and saying, hey, I'm short on cash. Can I get a few bucks off you? And we held that we couldn't regulate that speech. And we didn't pass that ordinance respecting freedom of speech. When the mayor, you said that threatening behavior tonight, that we get threatened, we do get threatened. On the other hand, there is a remedy because threats aren't free speech. And so if somebody says, I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to kill your cat, you can turn that into law enforcement. So there is a remedy if they cross the line of free speech. Free speech, you can't yell fire in a movie theater. And so it's not unlimited speech. So if somebody threatens one of us, that's not constitutionally protected. As far as the fee, actually, I've been receiving the same complaints that Jerry has, and maybe many of you. I would be for just waiving that fee because in my motion to amend, I wanted to add 10.4. In the case of an ethics complaint being filed and forwarded to outside counsel for a review, outside counsel shall make a determination whether the complaint has merit or is without merit and deemed frivolous. If deemed without merit and frivolous, the petitioner, the person that would have paid the $250, shall agree to pay the legal expenses associated with the claim. And so that in itself would deter people from filing frivolous claims. So we don't have to hit them on the front end with a fee and then on the back end too. And then I also put other language in there about false or frivolous complaints. They are subject to criminal prosecution for perjury if they file something against the law. And by the way, that was taken right from Scottsdale. And so they've already vetted that with their attorneys.
I know Councilwoman Toth has her light lit, but while you're talking about that one particular item, I feel like we're asking more of the citizens in this particular section. We're holding them to a higher standard than we are to ourselves because we're trying to remove the misinformation section, and but yet we're telling the citizens at the same time, you can't come to us with a frivolous and misinformation. It just doesn't make sense to me. So now y'all are held to a higher standard than we are, is what I see in this documentation. And that's just one of the problems that I have with it. I honestly, I would like to go through each of the items. 8.1, I feel like you deleted too many words. I still disagree with it, but I don't understand why you want to delete the words just and equitable laws, because then it reads work to enact and that promote the well-being of our community. So I feel like we do need to address these things individually, item by item, and not just carte blanche approve everything. Thank you. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a few points to address here as well. I'm just scrolling up to, because I realized I also want to kind of piggyback off of what Sharon was saying. I apologize, Councilwoman Gersbowski. Okay. Point being, I do thinking about it now, share the concern when we talk about the individual, if they are to file a frivolous claim, that they would be liable for that legal expense. And the reason I have this concern is who defines frivolous? Who decides whether or not you had the right to take issue with something? I have some concerns about where that could very easily become a slippery slope. Where I understand that we do receive frivolous complaints and we do receive complaints that don't quite make sense or whatever the issue might be, I do hesitate to err on the side of restricting someone's ability to raise an issue if they do have one. And then whether or not outside counsel decides if that's important enough, that should not be their financial responsibility. So that would be my one suggestion as we continue discussions with that motion that we do already have on the table. On top of that, when we do talk about the removing misinformation, the reason that I support that personally, misinformation is an extremely vague term, and as was brought up in Call to the Public, several things that were misinformation 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago are now not misinformation. A really good example of that is just the history when it comes to what has been referred to recently as the science. Well, the science is all about questioning, right? Back in the day, we believed that the earth was flat, and if you said the earth was round, you'd get stoned. Further than that, lead paint, we used to think that was safe. All fats are bad for you. Not true. Avocado fats are now pretty widely considered healthy for you. Carbs being the base of the food pyramid. The list goes on and on and on. Science is always changing, always evolving. When we talk about misinformation, and if people are speaking about a really hot topic right now, vaccine injuries. 4 years ago, 5 years ago, it was not considered a real thing at all. If you brought it up, you were a nut job. Well, now these stories are coming out, and it's been proven that these things do happen. Maybe it's a small percentage, but it does occur. My point in bringing all of that up is I take major issue with limiting misinformation
with the same reason that I take issue for the frivolous thing, because who defines misinformation? Who gets to tell you what is or is not true? Who is the authority on scientific truth when it comes to the council in Fountain Hills?
I go first.
Oh, sorry. Do you mind if I just interrupt with something? Oh, sorry.
Okay, thank you, and it'll just be quick, but just to address Council Member Toth. That's why I struck out that misinformation. That's just going to be gone if we adopt the amended, because yeah, your points are 100% valid. And as far as your concerns about 10-4, and this will be reviewed by the outside counsel to see whether it's meritless or has merit. And just again, in my experience as an attorney, I think in Aaron's experience as an attorney, when I used to be in the state's attorney's office, people would file charges, which I would review before they were filed. Attorneys do this all the time. And you'd get the complaint, crap, file. It's easy. It's really easy to determine if somebody is doing this maliciously just by reading the pleadings, or if there's some substance to this. And so I think we can trust on whoever the outside counsel is to read through this and say, no, this is meritless. This is a person that's just got an axe to grind. It's just if that'll allay your fears, because I'd like to pass it as is.
What I have to say might make what you want to say moot. I would like to amend my motion to take out the $200 fee. I don't know if Councilman Friedel wants to amend his second. No, it's fine. Okay.
The great debate, great discussion, and I don't, if it can continue for as long as the council sees fit. There was a question, the only thing I want to respond to is Councilmember McMahon's question about postponing discussion. I want to talk about, if that's going to happen, the appropriate procedure, since you had a question that I didn't get the opportunity to answer. That has to be in the form of a motion. It has to be seconded. It takes precedence over the main motion according to our rules of procedure, but if it fails, we proceed with voting on the main motion. So you would need to make a motion to postpone.
So I make a motion to
Postpone indefinitely, and we would bring it, and staff would bring it back for discussion.
Is this a discussion that is that we are able to have in executive session?
You can get legal advice in executive session.
Yes, and that's what I would like. I think that I appreciate everybody's discussion. There's been a lot of words and things said that they don't understand what, frivolous or not understand, excuse me, who gets to decide that, et cetera. I think that there are so many questions in the document about that I would appreciate legal direction on and refine it down to the essence of the matter so that we can feel that we're voting on a document that's going to stand up. So I'd like to make a motion that we table this and we move it to executive session for legal advice.
Thank you. Is there a second? Okay, then I want to discuss the motion that's on the table, and because it's basically what your amendments here, including the last part, but just taking out the $200. So again, I just have an issue. One of the issues is about how do you decide something that's frivolous? I get what you're saying, but obviously if it was that easy, we wouldn't have had all of the things that have happened here. So it's not that easy for everybody to say something is frivolous, or again, you have without merit. So basically, if somebody brought something forward, but there was no finding and it was without merit, then we would tell that person that they had to pay for that complaint, which can be, $1,200 or something. So I don't want to pass that. I don't want to pass that part. And then I don't like the part where you get to have a sponsor. I think that's also something that, I think there's a lot that's still there, even with your amendments, that I would
Just
wish
to
that
address
we...
that on the sponsor, since there's no fee, I don't think you need the sponsor because you could file it without the fee. The sponsor was to waive the fee.
I understand
So that would moot
But
that
the
point.
language, well, it would, but the language is still there. I think it's kind of a, it's not going to look like a very good document for us to be voting on, in my opinion. I would prefer to not do that, but the changes that you made, again, you took out the words just and equitable laws, and like Sharon said, we probably just meant just and equitable. I just think there are issues here that I would rather go back and fix it, clean it up a little bit. Let's see. Well, you left that part, so that's okay. Oh, and the gentleman had said something about saying equal instead of equitable. So that would be something to change.
Did you pass 8.2? Because I want to mention something about that.
Well, let's just say 8.1 then.
Okay.
It's just, it's like an amendment, I guess, but instead of saying remove just and equitable laws, can we change it to just and equal laws?
I can amend my motion to put laws back in 8.1.
What kind of laws? Just and equal laws or just and equitable laws? Just laws.
Just laws.
Laws.
Well, I'm amending your.
I was on the impression that was the word that was missing.
Well, you amended what, you are adding this as, your amendment is this document. So I'm amending that to say just and equal laws.
Why do we even need the sentence if you're going to get rid of those particular words?
Yeah, we get rid of the sentence.
Excuse me?
Well, first of all, I feel kind of bad for these guys because we're just kind of talking about stuff that they don't get to see. But instead of removing the just and equitable, which we all agree that the word laws needs to stay in there, otherwise it's this really awkward sentence. Instead of removing those words, let's just take out that sentence that's in red and leave it as is.
I know, I wish you guys could see it. All mine, I would just say, we are going to work to enact and enforce laws that promote the well-being of our community. That's how it would read. And we would take out just and equitable because, to go back to the environmental plan, that's politically charged and I don't like it.
Well, and to the point of not being able to see it, normally, or what we could often do would be people would be offering amendments that you wouldn't be seeing. We would come to a meeting, you have something in front of you, and you amend it. She just happened to write down her amendments, but she's speaking them. Yes, sir?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I don't want this to go really long, but try to make it as quick. So if we take out just and equitable, I think we have agreement here. So if we take the motion right here, and it says just and equitable laws, cross out laws, and it's just those three words, just and equitable, that are being amended. Is there a amended second?
Yeah, just that's fine.
6.2, which is this sponsor.
Oh, yeah, and let's, 10.6, since there's no $200 fee, let's remove the sponsor.
Just remove 10.6 completely.
Yeah, 10.6 completely.
Remove 10.6.
Sounds like there's a second.
I would also like to know why we're getting rid of the red verbiage in 8.2. I'm not sure I understand why we're removing it. As your elected officials, you should expect me to corroborate my statement with statements of facts or references or something like that. And I feel like by removing this, you're saying I can just
make stuff up.
Make stuff up.
Yep.
So I have a problem with removing that. I don't understand the thought process behind that.
Well, if you'd like to put that back in, you can amend and put that back in.
I would like to leave the red section of 8.2, which is on page 22 and 23, Amanda. Thank you for doing that. Instead of removing it as is in our suggested amendment, I would like to leave it in because I just don't understand the removal.
Can I have a point of clarification? Are we allowed to amend motions to amend that we did not create?
Yeah, so this is the way, we're presented with two alternate versions, the one that's in the packet, the one Brenda proposed, right? So technically, this is a main motion because we're asking for Brenda's. Brenda's proposing an amendment, but all it is a main motion, right? That's a misnomer.
Right.
This is a main motion. So if we want to go through and talk about, like Sharon just said, the motion to amend the main motion, we can do that.
Motion.
The motion to amend
But the
is
motion
not
would
an
be a motion to amend the amendment because Alan made the motion to amend Brenda's main motion. I'm sorry, I'm just very
Excuse me.
confused.
What we're doing is calling this still the main motion.
Yes.
Alan accepted a friendly amendment from whoever, whoever suggested it, and now it's all incorporated into the main motion. I'm just trying to make it real easy.
Right. Councilwoman Hannah, his is not an amendment. What he proposed is
Yes.
the motion.
His is the
So
motion.
right now,
His
we're
is the
amending
motion.
we call the motion.
Now we're talking about a motion to amend main.
The main motion, yeah.
And we already did twice, because we removed the sponsorship thing, and we
Yeah.
put back the word laws. So we've already amended it twice, and,
Because that was.
but we didn't vote on those, but I think everybody was okay with those. And now Sharon is trying to amend by putting back in section 8.2 as written. And do we have a second for that? Okay, should we vote on that?
Vote on the amendment, this Sharon's amendment.
Yeah.
If
I
it
know.
succeeds,
Leaving in the red words from 8.2, which
if
we're
it
all looking at
carries,
right
the
here.
main motion's amended.
Right.
If it fails, Alan's motion stays exactly the way that he proposed it.
But we're still discussing it. Roll call on that, on this amendment.
Councilmember McMahon. Councilmember Toth.
Nay.
Councilmember Fidel.
Nay.
Councilmember Skillicorn.
Nay.
Councilmember Calavianakis.
Nay.
Vice Mayor Guzbowski.
Aye.
Mayor Dickey.
Aye. Thanks. Aaron, should we vote on those two minor amendments that we already kind of accepted?
It seems
that
like
okay if we don't?
understood.
Okay.
And that Alan, you acceded to those amendments and Jerry seconded,
The
so
laws thing and
we
the
seem okay.
sponsorship. Okay.
I just don't know if there's any other, council member Grabowski. I was curious if she's had more, if she finds something. I mean, I don't want to be here all night, but if she finds something that's, that we want to change.
Absolutely. I told you I have something about every one of them. Okay, well, most every one of them. Going to 8.4, we've got on there that we're removing the section where it's the red words again. We recognize the exercise of free speech, blah, 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 ending with impact our words. Again, where I see removing this, we're suggesting that we draw a line in the sand regarding our official capacity and our personal behavior. Deleting that and deleting the two red things that are refrain from spreading hate and reflect on how our words, blah, blah, blah. Deleting that and those two lines. These behaviors are unacceptable from anyone, let alone an elected official who's representing the entire town, not just 25 of our best friends. Then add to it what we're going to look at adding section 10.4, which you guys aren't going to see at all because it's in writing in front of us. The section 10.4 talks about holding you, the citizen, to a higher standard because you've made false or misleading or unsubstantiating statements, and talking about criminal prosecution. So I have a problem with that. You're deleting stuff from us as elected officials regarding false and misleading statements, but leaving it in for the general public that it's not okay for them to do it, but it is okay for me to do it. I have a huge problem with that. I hear all the time that our elected officials do this and they should be held to a higher standard. Again, why are we making our own rules? And if it is true that we should be held to a higher standard, then why the hell are we removing this statement? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm still figuring out how to ask my question. I'm so sorry. Speaking of Councilwoman Kalvianakis's point regarding maybe politically charged language, and also the earlier point that we already have a code of ethics, I would like to strongly suggest that we take out this preamble when we talk about in keeping with the town. Okay, you know what? I can loosen up on that a little bit. My only real issue with the preamble is to the effective functioning of democratic government. We do not live in a democracy. We live in a constitutional republic. I know that is very anal of me, but it is truly a pet peeve of mine. We do not live in a democracy. Thank you.
Are we turning this to politics now?
I believe that this turned it into politics.
I disagree with your statement.
For those of you keeping track at home, that's the very first red section under Section 8 Code of Ethics.
Are there any further amendments? Or, no?
Was I supposed to make that a motion? I'm sorry.
Are you trying to remove the preamble?
I am trying to remove.
No, just
what am I trying to remove? I am trying to remove.
Democratic government.
I want to edit the language to the effective functioning of town government, of our government, however you would like to say that. I'm sorry, but it is a major pet peeve of mine.
So just remove the word democratic, would that be as,
yes.
okay.
Just remove democratic.
You want the word democratic out of there.
Yes, ma'am.
If I may add, just to recap, just so we can get our amendment right onto my main motion, that we will remove in the preamble democratic. We will remove the fee. We will remove 10.6 altogether. And I think, Alan, I'd still like to keep just and equitable out of there, but whatever you want to do. But those, just for you, Aaron, I think that's my tally of what's on the floor right now.
That's what I have. The only thing we haven't actually gotten to is democratic. I still need to know whether he's either going to accept it or we need it as an affirmative motion.
Do you want to make that as in part of your
What's it going to be replaced with?
Nothing.
Just government.
And you're removing 10.6. I'm sorry, let's do that first. So is the democratic thing okay with you?
It may be acknowledged, just to make sure. Okay. Well, this also a point of clarification. I believe I already amended my motion, and Councilmember Friedel seconded about the just and equitable.
Yeah.
Record reflect that was already removed from the. So the only proposed amendment right now from Councilmember Toth is to remove the word democratic. We're for democracy, but we're a democratic republic. We know that. Yeah, right. But we're not trying to say we don't like democracy, and it's not. But yeah, we're going to,
Jerry,
if you
that?
agreeable to that, remove that one word.
And now we're removing 10.6, which means we can't, you're saying the public body cannot follow the same process?
No, I think certainly we could follow the same process, but this is just waiving the fee, I thought.
I believe 10.6 was the sponsor, removing the sponsor.
10.6?
10.6 is for members of the public body who feel that there's an ethics complaint. That's for them. That's their provision. But it says filing fee waived. So let's say a member up here wanted to file a code violation against another member. They would follow that procedure. They would not be paying a fee.
But we've already waived the fee.
And
So you're looking at 10.2 is what you're talking about. Because if we don't have a filing fee, then we don't need a 10.2.
Right.
I'll just, Mayor,
Well, 10 10.2. Let's see. Let me make sure.
And just directing this to the mayor instead of,
Okay.
just the way we should be doing it. We did get rid of 10.2, which was a $200, but that left a gap because of 10.6, it mentioned waiving. And currently, we don't have a 10.6, and people still have the ability to file ethics filings. So removing this does not take away anyone's right there. So I see that as moot. And I'd like to call the previous question.
Yeah, 10.2 and 10.6 work together. So if we remove one, we should remove the other. You said
He
call for
wants
the
to call
question.
the
If that's a
question.
motion, then it has to get a second, and we have to have a 2/3 vote. Okay.
It's already been seconded.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, and all of those amendments and such and others accepted things. Just to clarify in myself that the 10.4 is still in existence as far as the public having to pay for the whole thing if it's found without merit? Okay. Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Calavianakis.
Aye.
Councilmember McMahon. No. Councilmember Toth.
Aye.
Councilmember Fidel.
Aye.
Councilmember Skillicorn.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Grabowski.
No.
Mayor Dickey.
Nay. All right. Thank you. Our last item before future agenda is council discussion direction to the town manager. I do have a couple things just calendar-wise. So, we were talking about having a mini retreat on November 2nd, and I'd also like to say that I would like to cancel the meeting on November 7th, which is Election Day. That's okay, and we'll be having the extra meeting. I know don't fight me on this, no. Everybody's happy as can be. So we'll do that. And is there anything from Call the Public or anything that anybody would like to comment on? Yes, sir? Oh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, staff. Thank you very much for the check register. It's very helpful. I know it's purview of manager. I'd love it to be part of the packet so that people could see it. Think about that. And then I just had, I have one of the, want to check on the update of the emergency services. I know it might take time to work on that, but is that coming?
Right now it's scheduled for October 3rd. We're going to be working with Chief Ott to make that happen. The October 19th agenda is pretty lengthy, so keeping that in mind, we wanted to, where the plan is for that date.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Okay, our next item is just future agenda items. Anything else?
I'll make a motion to cancel the November 7th meeting.
You don't have to. We did it. We're done. Any other? Yes, ma'am.
Me. Future agenda, I would like to put on the next agenda, set for 2 weeks from this meeting, a revision of the invocation guidance. There has been new case law that I have discovered that will clarify the previous guidance, and so I'd request that that be placed on the next agenda. Do I need a second and a third? Do I
I'll
have a
second
second and a third? Alan, you said yes? Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there isn't anything else, we are adjourned.